Hey all, I go by MicheleMidnight here on YouTube, and this is the first time I've ever tried to do a video tutorial. I am doing one with Sculpey clays to make a rose. Before I teach you how to make these roses, I want to point out a few things about them. One, depending upon how you make the base, it's going to be thick or thin. You can adapt that. Two, if you use the primos, the fimos, the lighter ones, they are going to work very thin, and you have to tell people these are almost as delicate as actual porcelain. And what I mean by that is if they fall, they can crack and tear. So tell people they're delicate if you make these for them. But the nice thing about making these roses is that you can do so many things with them. You can mix colors to make customs for people. You can also get a lot smaller. And what I will do now is shortcut through the process of making the flowers. First stage being, of course, picking your color. I actually mixed some white and blended two different types of Sculpey. Find sometimes it's stronger, and of course I worked it and conditioned it already. So what you then want to do is break it into little pieces, and I'm going to show you that. So if you notice, I've broken up my clay into 7 parts. One piece is bigger than the others. These are not exact, but they're close. They've already been conditioned, rolled into balls. There's 6. Now, in some tutorials I've seen where people have worked them out, all of the petals at once, and then placed them on. I find because you're constantly working the clay that putting one petal on and then letting that settle while you prep the next petal is better. But for the purpose of the tutorial, I will fast forward so that you don't have to watch the entire process. First stage, taking your largest piece and forming the base of your rose. These are based off of a fondant method used for working with fondant. And the nice thing about that is if you want later, you can actually cut off the base and round it out with your hand or with tools. But I always start with a little pointy. I get it onto my working surface. A lot of people I know like to use tile. And what you do is you just kind of work it around. You want to make sure that you do work this around, because if you're going to use it as a stand for itself, you want to make sure that base is going to have a little bit of width on it so that it's going to properly hold the weight of the rose when you're done. Okay. If you notice, it's wider at the bottom. Okay, we're going to get this first petal on. Just so you know, I'm going to be working this for a while, and I'm going to be working it thin. I'm going to be working it a lot thinner than you would normally see anybody work with Sculpey. So I'm going to cut off the camera and turn it back on in a minute once I've gotten this worked really thin for you. Okay, I have the first petal ready to place in my base. As you see, again, the base is a little wider at the bottom. I narrowed it down, made sure it's flat and sits well. I have done this very thin on the edges. Very. It's a little thicker in the middle. That just helps the weight balance in the end. And when you do this, it is going to get overworked very quick and easy. So you have to be light with your touch. And some people like to get their fingerprints out of all of it. To be honest, I leave it. I joke and say that's my signature. Okay. You take the base on a slight angle. Get that to collect a little, because you want to make sure that is above the top of the base a little. And then you come around. This is your first one. So you actually want to roll it so that it's going to close up down here, and you leave some open. If you notice, you got some bends already, which is really nice. I like to encourage the bends, and you don't want anything perfect. This is where your placement starts to matter. You always want to come so that you're starting from this side and you're covering over the bottom, and pull it in slightly on the other side. You want to have one side established as the direction that your rose is unfurling from. And doesn't matter if you screw up the petals a little as you go along the way. If you see what we've got going on now, The weight's going to be a little tricky, so I may have to play a little bit to hold it while I make the next petal. Remember, I'm making each petal individually, and I'm allowing my base to sort of settle in between and cool down a little bit. I have found it helps much better to keep this thing together. This is one of the few times that you want to kind of keep things even. Afterwards, we're going to put the other 3 petals on and stagger them around. But this you want to kind of go the opposite of, because remember, this is the inside of your flower. And so you just kind of come around like this. You're grabbing the bottom. And so now you have your inside. We're going to play with this petals a little bit, because if you notice, on the inside, it doesn't necessarily look all that wide. So what we do is we get it back down. We do a little curls with our petals. Some people use tools. I usually use my hands, the sides of my fingers. I don't worry if I get little tears here and there, because flowers tear. I'm going to now do the next 3 petals and speed through them. What I will be doing is starting the first one here in the midline where these 2 connect. Okay, the last petal on. You can make them with more petals, but I find them kind of heavy and bulky when you do that. Putting the last one on, as you see, going at a slight angle, finishing off the area. And it should be a little lower. Doesn't necessarily have to be as high as all the others, because it's a lower petal. It would be dropping because it had been on the longest. It's the last petal. One of the things I do when I run it with my fingers is I smooth out the base some, because that helps me reestablish that I have a stand underneath. It also helps me kind of make sure that the petals are blended underneath to give a cleaner line. Okay, last thing, now that it's made, I've gotten the bottom smoothed out, all the petals are looking good underneath. If you see now, they're connected, but they're loose enough to know that you've got individual petals. You could reform this base. You could take the base off if you wanted, but I suggest cooking it on the base. I've taken some off, and I find it better to actually cut them off later and glue them, because it's usually you're going to attach it to something. So baking, you're going to have to experiment. I say start with what's on the package and then play around. My toaster oven, everything burns when I do it at the recommended temperatures and times. So I've had to make adjustments. You're going to have to do the same with yours most likely, just like cooking food. When I start sharing some of the new things I'm making, I will put links to everybody I've been learning from, and there's some cool people out there doing charms, miniatures, set pieces, just teaching you how to use Sculpey, how to mix Sculpey, how to make canes, how to make jewelry, keychains, all types of things. So when I start making some of those videos, I will show you links in the box for them. I don't remember where I learned the fondant method. The base was something I did on my own, and I've watched other rose tutorials, and I've never seen one quite like this one, so I thought I'd share it, thinking that maybe some of you could potentially make use of making roses for some event or occasion. And this method might come in handy for you.